I have a scenario for you that I'd like you to really spend some time thinking about. So picture this. Right after that story about the U.S. government keeping tabs on traditional Catholic communities across the U.S., but especially in the Washington, D.C. metro area, you're headed to your traditional Mass, and you see some suspicious activity going on. Weird, obvious government cars driving around the parish in the parking lot with unusual amounts of antennas and lights on them, with tinted windows. Windows so tinted, in fact, you can't really see the people inside, but you can make out the dim light of laptops. You can tell that notes are being taken on the cars in the parking lot, that they're writing down license plates. If you saw that, how would that make you feel? Would it make you feel like some of the weird, fringe podcasters and bloggers like me, who might be a guilty pleasure for you, or maybe even ones that you dislike, might be right, at least this once? Because this actually happened. And I don't often quote sacred scripture directly on this channel to make a point, but I'll do so here. Psalm 145, according to the Dewey-Rhames translation, reminds us of this universal axiom. As believers in the true God, we cannot trust the lords of this world. The psalmist writes, quote, "Put not your trust in princes, in the children of men in whom there is no salvation. His spirit shall go forth, and he shall return into his earth. And that day all their thoughts shall perish. Blessed is he who hath the God of Jacob for his helper, whose hope is in the Lord his God, who made heaven and earth, the sea and all things that are in them, who keepeth truth forever, who executeth judgment for them that suffer wrong, who giveth food to the hungry. The Lord looseth them that are fettered. The Lord enlighteneth the blind. The Lord lifteth up them that are cast down. The Lord loveth the just. The Lord keepeth the strangers. He will support the fatherless and the widow, and the waves of sinners he will destroy. The Lord shall reign forever. Thy God, O Sion, unto generation and generation." What that means is simple. The lords of this world are not your friends. Do not rely on them for anything. They will betray you. They will come for you simply because you follow the Lord. But in the end, the Lord will sweep them all the way. We saw this, by the way, last week in Boston, where a picture was painted for us that can't be denied. Our benevolent rulers who really only have our best interests at heart, sorry, can't say that with a straight face, who aren't benevolent at all, made it look like all the worst elements in the world were opposed to the actual Satan worshippers, thus trying to make the servants of Satan seem reasonable compared to the Catholics, who appear to be allied with what they called the worst elements in society, the same people they spent the last 6 or 7 years demonizing. That event was obviously a trap, which I knew it would happen, hence my reticence about endorsing it. But in so trying to make the servants of Satan seem to be reasonable ones, what they accomplished was a weird endorsement of all the people they want you to think are the real worst elements in society. Because, here's the thing, even mainline atheists, the kind of atheists you kind of get along with at work, other than as long as religion doesn't come up, and lukewarm Christians of all stripes, along with believers of other traditions, none of them like the self-described devotees of Satan. None of them do, for obvious reasons. It was funny to behold in a weird, kind of sad way. It really was. And I bring that up here today when talking about this story involving the FBI because this is what we are truly up against. We're not up against a well-meaning system that just has got some misplaced priorities. No, we're up against a world that thinks the devotees of Satan are more trustworthy than Catholics who simply want to worship the God the same way our ancestors did and to live according to the same values that every human being in the Western world did up until the equivalent of last week. They fail to realize that honestly, if what you want is a stable society of people who won't try to upend things for their own petty and evil reasons, we are literally the last people they should be opposed to. But, of course, they're opposed to us because our values and theirs conflict at the most basic level. They are not compatible in the slightest. Many pretend that they are, but they're not. With that caveat, we head to the Daily Signal for this headline. Exclusive. Latin Mass churchgoers witness suspicious activity after FBI's radical traditional Catholic memo. This article was posted on their site this past Sunday, meaning right after the events in Boston. Now, it's worth noting here that the events you're going to hear described here obviously happened sometime earlier than this, but it's still worth noting that this happened after the initial FBI story broke in late January or early February, with the head of the FBI pretty much lying to congressional investigators about the story. He did that. From the article, quote, "Two parishioners at a Latin Mass Catholic church in rural Northern Virginia say they witnessed suspicious activity from what looked like FBI vehicles in February, a month after the FBI's Richmond office published a now rescinded internal memo focused on, quote, radical traditional Catholics. The FBI's Washington, D.C. office, which monitors the church's area, denied any knowledge of such activity in a statement to the Daily Signal. Of course they did. The two witnesses told the Daily Signal that they saw two cars approach the church, drive through the parking lot as if they were writing down license plate numbers, and then leave, on two separate instances outside Immaculate Heart of Mary Chapel in Linden, Virginia, some 63 miles west of Washington, D.C., between February 12th and February 26th. The memo had been published on January 23rd and rescinded on February 9th. I saw a black Ford car with dark-tinted windows and knob-like antenna on the top, one parishioner, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, told the Daily Signal. It was probably a good idea at this point to be anonymous. It was driving very slowly by all the cars, and I could see a laptop in the center front. I could not see the person inside, and no one ever got out, the witness added. They did leave as soon as they saw me looking at them. I saw a white Chevrolet Tahoe car with very tinted windows and lots of antennas, driving slowly through the parking lot. The other witness told the Daily Signal, also speaking on the condition of anonymity. Looked like a male. He had an open laptop in the middle of the car. Not sure if he was typing, as the window was very dark. He never got out of the car, but by the time I saw him, he was on his way out and drove back towards the highway after pulling through. The second parishioner added, Not sure how long he was out there, as we were all inside. Everyone else was still inside the chapel. So he must have been going around while we were all inside at Mass/Catechism. I suspect that it was the FBI, the witness added. However, I could not confirm, since he never got out of the car. The witnesses reached out to the Heritage Foundation's oversight project, which connected them with the Daily Signal. And here's their editor's note: the Daily Signal is the Heritage Foundation's media outlet. End quote. By the way, the vehicles they described were clearly law enforcement, because that's how law enforcement vehicles have their computer set up, right up there at the dashboard. Now, I'd really like to know what the local bishop has to say about this. I know that congressional investigators have asked questions of federal agents about this, but I'd almost be open to having the bishop grilled about this. And that might surprise you, because I usually like to keep internal church problems internal, but here's why I would be okay with that in this case. This happened in the Diocese of Richmond, whose bishop is the Right Reverend Barry Nestout, whom ComplicitClergy.com had very few positive things to say about when he was elevated in late 2022. Here's the headline from their write-up on him, and that'll tell you everything you need to know about him. Still tone deaf. U.S. bishops choose McCarrick's former secretary and roommate as chairman of the Committee on the Protection of the Most Vulnerable. Yes, former Cardinal Ted McCarrick's former roommate. Starting to sound like a Mel Brooks movie plotline. He had a lot of those, by the way, including Nighty Night Tobin, among a few others. McCarrick was in deep with the U.S. government, by the way. That's a pretty well-established fact at this point. But let's get back to the Daily Signal write-up on this, because as it turns out, the parish in question was an SSPX chapel, which may also be why Bishop Nestout probably won't say much at all on this. By the way, I said this earlier this week, but I'll mention it again here. Catholic Family News has an article detailing the 24 times the Vatican has said over the years that the SSPX are not in schism, that you can attend Mass just fine with them, and even donate to their chapels with a clear conscience. And I only tell you that because some of you ask that question, and others repeat the lie that circulates that they are in schism when the Vatican has said 24 times they're not. Now, if the internet is up and running sufficiently by the time this video goes live, I'll try to have a link to it in the show notes at returntotradition.org, because if you don't know, a tornado hit my town and the internet's been spotty. But here's what we know. According to the Daily Signal article, this happened at an SSPX chapel called Immaculate Heart of Mary Chapel in Linden, Virginia. This happened after the memo that compared traditional Catholics to, we'll just say, rather unsavory groups from American history, the kinds who like to wear bed sheets, right? That opposed everyone who wasn't their particular weird brand of Protestant, including and especially Catholics and our so-called elder brothers in the faith. And of course, most notoriously, those Americans descended from those put into involuntary servitude in the American South and elsewhere in the country. I assure you of this much, though. If it happened in the Washington, D.C. area, then it's happened elsewhere. I've heard reports of this in Oklahoma of similar things happening, word of mouth from people I know at various Latin Mass parishes here. And I've seen some of you in the comments say this kind of thing happened at your parish or at a parish someone you know attends. Let me know in the comments if this hits close to home for you. But I am legitimately curious what you think about all of this. Is there a concerted effort by the princes of the world to make the faithful Catholic remnant look like the same kinds of people we've seen the media demonize the past few years, especially those who were involved in that little party that went on in January of 2021 in the imperial capital? Now, is this something we should be concerned with? Should we just boldly walk into those traps, knowing that they're traps? Will this backfire spectacularly for the princes of this world in this life? Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. And make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. Send me any accounts if you can, in an email if you want to. It's in the description box below. If you have any more stories like this from your parish, if I get a sufficient number of them, I may do a video on them, just because I suspect this is not an isolated issue with that parish in Virginia. Again, send me an email if you have it. Anyway, as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.